Everyone, Victor Nuno here. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the new player cards that we have for this year. That a lot of time and effort went into it. I think that they're really insightful and have a lot of data, but I know that I've been getting a lot of questions about exactly how to interpret them, what they mean, and so I figured it was worth kind of going over some things. So go over a couple cards and talk through some of the top processes. So first one we're going to look at here is Matthew Schaefer, number one overall pick. And one of the things that I want to point out right off the top is that this first Upset rating, this is the only thing that's subjective by me. This is a number and a rating that goes 1 through 10. The first digit is basically how good they are in your fantasy team. The 10 is Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Nathan McKinnon, basically studs that always stay on your roster. You start all the time. They're a cornerstone rock of your team, superstar. A 5 would be an average roster player that you would want on your team, but isn't anything too exciting. You probably are not going to stream them off. You probably keep them on your roster, but they're like nothing special. And anything below that is, either streamer territory or not really relevant. A 4, maybe someone you'd be interested in streaming every now and then. A 3, probably, someone who's an AHL or a depth guy never quite made it. And below that, it's just nothing really worth talking about. So a 6 would be just above average, someone that you would like to have on your team. And 7, right between a 5 and a 10 there. So definitely worthwhile, definitely a good fantasy asset. An 8 is someone who's really solid, that is a pretty important part of your team. And a 9 is a near superstar, or probably a superstar, but just not an elite superstar. The second number is a percentage that they hit that first number. So here we have Matthew Shaver at 95% chance of hitting that 7. So that means that I'm extremely confident that he is going to be a well above average player on your fantasy team. People often ask, what is the difference between a 7.95 and an 8.15 or an 8.05 or something like that? And the reality is probably not much, because this doesn't mean that he cannot hit an 8. It just means that I'm extremely confident he can hit a 7. Could he be an 8? Could he be even better? Sure. But I personally would rather express it this way for someone like Schaefer, because if I put him at an 8.05, that's saying I have very little confidence that he could get to an 8. One thing that isn't very easily expressed in this configuration is how, if I say 8.05, does that mean that he defaults to a 7, or is the floor lower than that? Because this percentage really only talks about how likely he is to hit that ceiling, but it doesn't really discuss the floor. Now, in Schaefer's case, I think the ceiling and floor are pretty close to each other. But for some people, the ceiling may be an 8, but the floor may be a 5. And there may be a wide range there, and it's hard to express that in a number that makes sense, that's consistent for everybody. Some of the things to think about here, the rest of these numbers essentially are just expressed ratios from the league that the player played in this case, the OHL. Down this left side are basically additive to the categories. We'll come back to these. If you just look at time on ice, this is how much time on ice does he get relative to everyone else in the league. He's in the 80th percentile. Well, that makes sense. He played a lot when he did play. Because this is per game that was played. And then if you break it down, total time on ice, he was out there more than anyone when he was out there. Possession, power play time, shorthanded time, and how many penalty minutes he got. And all of those feed into this number of total of time. Then we can look at shooting. Okay, he shoots a lot, but that's broken down into shots on goal as opposed to just shots at the goal, but actually ones that land on goal, saved by the goalie or scored. Scoring chances, expected goals, and goals. Now, all of these are related again to the league compared to all the other skaters in that specific league. So just the OHL. And if it's a defenseman, just for defenseman. If it's forwards, it's for forwards. So it's looking at it based on that. Passing, is, this number is an addition of all these sub additions, and these are percentiles again based on that league. And then we have peripherals that takes into account face-offs, blocks, takeaways, hits, and bash. This is block shots and hits. So the bash takes into account these shots, the blocks, and the hits to express a percentile. So that's how much bash he gets relative to the rest of the defensemen in the league, adding up those three categories. So takeaways is kind of separate, and then faceoffs is separate, and obviously defensemen don't take faceoffs, so that is excluded in their peripheral contribution for defensemen. And then play driving is an addition or an average of all of these again. So that takes into account loose puck recovery, which is an independent stat, as is puck battles won. And then Corsi and Fenwick are similar. Remember, Corsi is unblocked shot attempts at the goal, and Fenwick is unblocked shot attempts on goal. So there's a little difference there because Corsi gives a little bit of latitude if it's chucked towards the goal, whereas Fenwick, um, or sorry, Corsi includes block shots. So if you shoot towards the goal and it's blocked, Corsi still gives you credit for that. Fenwick, on the other hand, only counts unblocked shots. The reason I like Fenwick a little bit better is because it's actually a skill, I think, to get the puck on net and to not get it blocked. So you shouldn't get a credit if you shoot into shin pads. You shouldn't get credit for a shot towards a goal or driving play because that didn't really help. And then net expected goals is a different calculation that's used to express how many. It's a big formula that's looked at how many expected goals you're getting while you're out there. So all of those average into play driving as a general category. And then transition is the addition of breakouts. Breakouts include dump outs, passing it out of the zone, and carrying it out of the zone. So those three are breakouts. And then entries are dump ins, passing in, and carries in. So one of the things that you can see here is that Matthew Schaefer doesn't dump the puck out. So that does mean that that is averaged in. And so you're probably looking at this saying, why is his transition 82 and all his numbers are in the 90s? It's because that one's a zero. So if we just excluded that, you could easily say that he's, probably 95th percentile for the things that he does well. And that's fair. So sometimes you have to look at these zeros and know to ignore them or not. So that's kind of important to keep in mind. So look at another player, Matthew Savoy. And one of the things you see right away that Brandon, the great RHHL commish, who helped set up these cards, it's all based on color coding. And so when the numbers go down, they become this yellow, orange, and then red and burgundy. So it's like more displeasing to the eye right off the bat. You can see that there's very little green, which is more difficult to look at, and that's intentional. So the first thing you see is that the puck stud rating, my ranking for him is 6.25, 25% chance of being a six. And then there's these average numbers. Oh, I forgot to mention the average numbers. So for points, this average percentage just has to do with the points, the shooting and passing, or sorry, the goals and assists. The goals and assists averaged together just gives you the points. So that's how many points they are getting in relative to their league compared to their league mates. And then this average is basically everything averaged together. And that's why this looks so bad. One of the reasons this looks so bad for Matthew Savoy is that a lot of these stats just don't have data. And so that doesn't mean that he's not doing it. It just means that the data wasn't collected. I'm very sure that Matthew Savoy attempted some passes in the AHL and then he accomplished and he made some passes, passed it to the slot, all of these things. Sometimes our stat provider just doesn't have stats for that particular player and that particular stat. So rather than dumping the whole data set, some of these cards just look a little wonky. And that is certainly the case here for Savoy. So that's important to kind of keep in mind. Whenever you see these zeros, it doesn't mean that he's not doing it in general, except for face-offs for defensemen. That's not happening. But in general, that's what it means. So that's important to keep in mind. And again, this is all relative to the AHL. So some of these players who have AHL and then WHL or OHL and AHL, or especially like the Swedish and Finnish kids who have A20 and then Liga or SHL, they look completely different in each league. And it's kind of useful to compare one to the other to see how well they can do in one system versus another system. It's usually pretty telling. But again, these numbers are only relative to that league. And these are not projection numbers. These are actually what's happening. So the only projection number really is this Puckstead rating. That's really important to kind of keep in mind. Some of these can be really informative, like Johnny Lakaramaki this year. He had pretty good season for Abbotsford, 28 points in 36 games during the regular season, 7 points in 16 playoff games on their way to the Calder Cup. And you would say, wow, a really successful season. I can't wait for him to play more NHL games and really light it up. Then you look at some of the underlying numbers and you see that there are potentially some issues. I mean, there isn't a lot of data for some of these, but you can see that there was some decent play driving here. You can see that the perfs are kind of low. Some of the assist totals are kind of low, but the Corsi net expected goal, these parts are pretty good. And I wish some of these other numbers played out, unfortunately, but that's just the way it is sometimes. But
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what she wants. I was recording something though. Yeah. Did you change my mouse? I have a different mouse connected to my computer. So here's another card, Isaac Howard, and this shows all of his data. It has all the transition data, it has the play driving, and you can see the different components that are actually listed here. So for transition, there's okay, well, I was gonna clean this up. Oh, that's okay. I don't think we can have a meeting in the same place on mornings. Oh, somebody plug in the mic. I don't understand why we couldn't. We've done it before. You just have to mute. And so you take that, Watson's over here, disconnected.
And the white one was connected, I don't even know who it is.
So I will get it set up tomorrow.
Oh, this is mine, it's got a little tag.
We need to remember to register them for launches.
Maybe you connected it, not thinking I have.
And connect with it.
Huh?
They connect with it.
Nobody, I just need to register it tomorrow.
Register with it.
Them for
I
lunches.
know that I had slack.
Summer camp.
What's going on with the cross country?
Well, we need to register if she's gonna do it, but it doesn't sound like they're that excited, so. Man, I
Talk
don't
to
know,
her about it?
haven't really, no, tomorrow.
So we're talking about it.
Okay,
Are you gonna work up here?
tomorrow,
Oh, okay, well,
tonight I'm just gonna go, I'm tired. Yeah. So,
oh, this is what.
I was just trying to finish this and then everyone came up here.
yeah, we need to talk to her about that. And find out if she's even interested. I mean, it would be good, if a sport that she can do at school.
How much is it?
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's on Thursdays. They're short days. So if they're doing skating on Tuesdays,
Well, we need to find out what it is.
huh?
We need to find out when it is. I don't think that email said when it was.
How much? Ross?
Yes, and when. I don't know that I saw either of those things.
I mean, I have a feeling that at this level, it's not gonna be super competitive.
No, it's just to get it running.
Be something to get rid of some.
Okay, I'm gonna try to finish this, okay?
Yes. Um. Well, crap, including this.
So you can see the numbers here are mostly really green, except for some of the breakout via pass. And sometimes for certain players, you'll see that they actually don't like to dump it in or dump it out. And sometimes you can kind of ignore that function because this isn't necessarily the case for Howard, but some people don't like to dump it out or dump it in, but the rest of the numbers are stellar. But their overall transition numbers will look lower because of those two. And you could just ignore those because if they're excellent at passing it and carrying it, then who cares if they don't like to dump it? One thing that Howard that's interesting that I think is really important to look at is loose puck recovery. These are, especially for an undersized guy, like do they get after the puck? What is their off puck? If they lose it, do they get after it? That's really important. And I think he's really, really good at that. Puck battles is also another thing, how competitive they are, how much they go after the puck and try to fight in the corners and get those pucks. And he's also really good at that, which is one of the reasons why I have a little bit higher rating for him.
We asked her if we checked the phone.
Well, then she's.
And so they find some chips.
You know, she's not gonna know.
They'll find somebody else, which. But, I don't.
Sometimes having some red and orange isn't the worst thing if you're talking about a draft eligible playing in a more difficult league like the Hockey Allsvenskan, like Victor Eklund did. It isn't, ideal to have subpar transition numbers, but the fact that he's doing this in a difficult league with a limited role against some really tough competition, you can take all that into context, right? Okay, maybe his entries and carries in aren't great, but look, he did carry in pretty well considering, and he didn't really dump it out ever. And that could be sort of ignored a little bit. You can look at most of his play driving is phenomenal, actually. If you just look at these three, sure, maybe he could battle for the puck a little bit more and have some better loose puck recovery, but these are also much bigger, stronger guys that and he needs to bulk up a little bit. But these two can get there, and these three are already stellar. So context, nuance, always important, right? And thinking about that in terms of how much time on ice he's getting compared to, the percentage and how what he's able to do in that time versus quality of competition is always really, really important to think about. As another example here, you can see James Higgins and probably why I know a lot of people are so high on him, 7.75 puck stud rating. But you see how much green there is here. And yeah, maybe he isn't the biggest hitter or takeaways, but most of his play driving is excellent. His transition game, excellent. He doesn't really like to dump it out or dump it in, but if you take those out, he's like, 80th, 5th percentile or so. And that's all really important, especially considering the league he was playing in during his draft season and the time of opportunity that he had. Some of the red things, okay, he doesn't play a lot shorthanded. That's fine. Maybe he will as he gets a little bit more mature and doesn't really block a lot of shots. But, if you kind of realize that some of these can kind of be ignored reasonably, then it puts it into a lot better context and kind of shows you just how excellent he is. So hopefully that gave you some context and understanding of what the cards mean, what the ratings are, the 1 through 10, and the percentage. That's what I'm trying to convey, how confident I am that they can get to certain thresholds and what the rest of the cards mean. It's really hard to find a lot of the data on transition, play driving, pitch block, shots, face-off wins. So all those things are, I think, really important, but just important to know that everything except the puck stud rating is just a reflection of how they're doing in the league. And all of this is based on per 60, not on total time on ice. And so if the player has more of a role in time on ice that they will be developing, then I think that that's important to keep in mind too, because that can really shift the total numbers. All right, thanks so much. And if you are interested in becoming a patron and getting access to these, check out patreon.com/fantasyhockeylife. The Ultra Lifer tier gets you access to all the player cards. If you want just the ranks, then you can buy a $10 worth of coffee to our web guru, Brandon, our HHL commish, and you can get a PDF download of all the ranks, team by team ranks. Doesn't give you the player cards, but it gives you all of those ranks, which is pretty cool. And that's updated periodically throughout the year. And then a whole bunch of other perks for the lifers and mega lifers if you're interested in that, including playing in the tier dynasty, patron cast, patron priority channel, show notes, all kinds of cool stuff. So check all that out at patreon.com/fantasyhockeylife. Thanks for your support, and hopefully you found this useful. Take care.